Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People Policy Institute's Inside Analysis of the state of affairs in Israel and the Jewish world. There's a lot going on. We're after the Iranian attacks against Israel when hundreds of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles were fired into Israel on Sunday morning, and we are waiting with great anticipation to see if and when Israel will retaliate and what will happen next. Here's just one thing to think about when looking at this whole situation, and that is that today, unfortunately, almost a tragedy, Israel is the most attacked country in the world. We have Hamas in Gaza. We have the Houthis from Yemen who are launching missiles and drones at us. We have, of course, Hezbollah on the border with Lebanon, 18 soldiers wounded just yesterday in an anti-tank missile and suicide drone attack on soldiers deployed along the border. And of course, Iran, which attacked Israel on Sunday. Sometimes it's just simple enough to look at the situation and say, this just isn't normal. And what will the world and Israel do about it? Well, we're all waiting to see. And while all of that is important, on today's episode, we're going to take a break from the security talk and look internally for a moment at an issue that, if it had not been for the Iranians, would be probably the most talked about and important issue for Israel right now. That is the Haredi draft. People tend to look at this, the issue of the ultra-Orthodox, as something that is domestic and political. But as you'll soon hear, it is about the survival and future sustainability of the Jewish state. That's exactly what we're talking about. I'm joined by two guests on today's podcast. Rabbi Menachem Bombach, the founder and head of the Netzach Educational Network, a Haredi rabbi who's been working for years, and it's impressive, to improve the education of Haredim and get them into quality jobs in the Israeli workforce. As you'll soon hear, Rabbi Bombach advocates for a bottom-up approach with the ultra-Orthodox. Get the Haredim to work and start things from the bottom up, and then let nature take its course. Eventually, he claims, the whole situation will change. But I then talk to JPPI Vice President, Professor Shuki Friedman. He's been writing about and analyzing the Haredi community for decades. Shuki advocates a whole different approach than Rabbi Bombach, one that would require a political change. It wouldn't be possible in the current coalition. But basically what it seeks to do is change the whole situation from the top down, not the bottom up. And it starts, according to Shuki, with cutting off the state budgets. It makes no sense, he says, that Israel is paying for people to remain below the poverty line and to dodge the draft. Two very interesting perspectives on a very important issue. Here we go. Rabbi Menachem Bombach, it's great to have you on the JPPI podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. My honor.
So you are the head of the Netzach, basically educational network. You have elementary schools, high schools, post-high school programs, and you've really been, I want to say, one of the more outspoken, but also personally, as someone who's gotten to know you and your story, really inspirational characters and figures in the landscape of people who are really trying to change the reality in the Haredi community for the better. Not people who are coming, because there's a lot of people who come and are coming to weaken and undermine, but you're trying to make it and to better integrate. So I really commend you for that. But I also want to talk about the fact that there is no secret that today there's a lot of tension within Israeli society. I'd like to kind of get from you, before we even get into the whole issue of chokiyus, right, of the IDF draft law and what should happen and what should not happen. And people should also know, I think you serve in the reserves, right? So let's talk just at the higher level for a moment. How do you view what's happening right now with this just underlying tension, I would say, since October 7th, between the secular portion of Israel and the Haredi sector of Israel?
I would tell you, maybe I will start somewhat and explain a little bit Netzach, and I will describe a little bit my journey in the community. As you mentioned, I absolutely agree with you that I'm coming with love and loyalty to the community. I love very much my community, but at the same time, I have the privilege to criticize the community just because I grew up there. Why should I criticize other communities, right? And as always saying, I'm not an agent to change, I'm agent to preserve. I believe that if those actions will not be, things will not change in the community, the Haredi community is going to lose a lot of people in the coming years. So I have interest to make some changes, to change and according to preserve the community. So, and regarding your question, when we are speaking about October 7th, as you know, I'm working very hard for many years to build a solid and a strong system in education, just to make sure that more and more Haredim as a full system, education system that will combine secular studies and religious, and then fully integrate them in Israeli society in the coming years. We understand their all efforts for many years to encourage Haredim to become a part of Israeli society in the age of 20 is quite hard. Sometimes it doesn't work for many, many reasons. And this is what brings me to explain more your question about October 7th. And I will say like this: if you don't, since you grew up, you are not a part of Israel, don't think that things will change in one night. Even it's a dramatic occasion, even something very dramatic happens in Israel, and we see much more unity, we see much more people much more identified, we can see much more solidarity, but still, a culture is such a strong issue that it's quite hard to change culture. And once things are going back, so people go back to their customs, to their behaviors, to their attitudes, and to their beliefs. So nothing happens dramatic. Yes, there are much more discussions, people asking more questions, and but unfortunately, I want to share with you one thing. In October 7, if you heard that the spokesman of the army, Daniel Agari, he said that 2,000 Haredim wants to enlist to the army. And I said, wow, this is a huge and a great moment and in history, in regarding of relationship in Israeli society. And I just text for Daniel, we are close friends. So I text and ask him, how do you know 2,000 people? It sounds amazing. It's a good beginning. And he said, yes, I would never say something if I wouldn't check it. And then I dive in the numbers and the people who was active in this field. And I figure out that, yes, there is almost 2,000 people who want to volunteer to the army, but in the army, it was not ready for it. People don't understand. When we speak about the army, it seems that the army is just raiding of the Haredi community. Just come and I'm going to give you. No, so many people in the Haredi, in the army. First of all, it was not enough attention in the army, and for right reasons. Not to focus about the Haredi community and about to take them. And we mainly speak about the second stage in the army. It's between 25 to 45. To take people, to get them trained for 2 or 3 weeks, and then to become a part of the army. So I was involved. I said I'm going to do everything to encourage more and more Haredim to become a part of this movement, and just to normalize the uniform. Just imagine 2,000 people are walking by street, going to their cities, to neighborhoods, to their places, whatever, and people sitting with uniform. As I was 64 days in the army, right? And everybody asked me, oh, what's your job? What's your position? To normalize, and this is what could really help the next generation to become a part of it, because it becomes normal.
Right. So, but I want to split into two, because what you're focused on for a moment before we talk about the army, and we're going to get to that also, but let's just give me some numbers about Netzach, right? How many kids are in the elementary school? How many are in the high school? How many are in the post high school programs? What are the numbers that you have of graduates? And just for our listeners to understand, these are people who are getting, doing matriculation exams, they're getting degrees, they're going into the workforce. And you've also been a big proponent, I'll just put here, of lowering the draft age exemption to make it lower than it is today, so that Haredi men in particular, because women are working at high levels, right? Most people don't know, but Haredi women are working at 75+% in Israel. So they are very much similar to the secular Israeli women. It's Haredi men who aren't working at the same level of workforce participation. What are the numbers that you've had of success with Netzach?
So when you mentioned 7-8% of the women, but don't forget, it's not a question how many of them are working in the workforce, how many get a good income.
Correct.
And the average income is quite low. So that's why we are also involved in girls' education. We think it's a part of the equation. I mean, we need to be, it's a huge mistake. People think, 7-8%, it's similar, it's comparable to the Israeli society, but not. So many women are in slave markets, or they don't have the right conditions to become, to get a higher income. And that is not what really contributes to the Israeli economy. So yes, I started my first school for 10 years ago, the first Hasidic high school in Israel. That it was not easy because it's a Haredi city. And, as you can imagine, just to go in a Haredi city and with mainstream kids, not edges, not robots, and to base a normal Hasidic school, and at the same time that with a full matriculation project. So it was not easy in the beginning, but yes, we started 10 years ago, and it was also a moment I realized it's not a question of a demand. We need to create a reality. We need to make more schools, and again, to normalize the phenomenon. I mean, it should be normal.
Right.
So we started for 10 years ago, and for six, almost 7 years, we started as a network of schools. So we have in Bet Shemesh, we have in Yerushalayim, we have in Beitar, we have in Petach Tikva. We are working, hopefully we're up the next year, we're going to have 20 schools. It's a nice network of schools, yeah. We have elementary school, high school, we have thousands and thousands of kids. Boys school and girls school. We have also a school for girls, a nursing school. Together with Mechon Lev, we have a pre-academic program for to become a doctor. I mean, it's for Haredim, very, very good and special projects. And again, we don't want to be the only actor. We just want to inspire our friends and our neighbors, and I would say more. This is about the official and the amazing schools we have. The demand is growing more and more. And I can tell you something very interesting. At the Corona time, our community, they try to teach their kids via the phone. Just imagine 7 kids at home, just fighting on a phone, it's like impossible. The Zoom was quite hard, but now just imagine about a phone. So we start the first virtual school, Haredi virtual school, that teach English, math, and science. And we start with very few kids, right? Now it's between the age of 14 and up, right? We have also adults, but we have now 35,000 Haredi.
35,000.
Yeah. Registered to the site. We have a lot, very high percentage that finished the all courses, and it's very intensive, and it's like
it's an online school for English, math, and science.
Yeah.
Wow. So basically, I mean, what I hear from you, Rabbi Bombach, is that there's a desire, there's obviously a need, and people want to, I don't want to use the word break out of this community, because it's not about breaking out of the community, but it's about breaking out of the poverty cycle, let's call it. And it's about being able to provide and live a decent life and have that education. But the political situation in Israel is just not helpful. And, I was reading an op-ed that you wrote not long ago, for actually the Jerusalem Post. And I'll just read the last line because this is what I wanted to get to. You won't hear about it from our politicians, but please don't underestimate our willingness and our commitment to contribute to Israeli society. So what is it about the Haredi politicians that they don't want Haredim better integrated into Israeli society?
I think it's first of all, it's about power, not losing power. I think it's the only way you can preserve your community, to make them depend on you. And this is a very simple way to make you like, you don't have your own voice. I don't consider you as an individual. I just, it's just a collective issue. But I want to tell you something. First of all, we need to be empathy also to my community. I can tell you, usually those kinds of rejection, of not supporting, it comes usually because there is a huge fear of losing, to not become, to lose men, to dropouts. I mean, they're afraid from dropouts. The amount of people will leave the community could be much more higher than today. Today, we're speaking about 10% from every class. I mean, it's a real fear, because once you reveal to the community, to the wider community, you are part of it, and you don't have enough anchors, and your identity is not enough strong, so you have fear. So we need, in some ways, empathy, but the members, the Haredi members in Knesset, I think if you would ask him quietly, right, ask him one question: do you really believe that the Haredi community will survive without being a part of Israeli society? They know exactly the answer, that they will not survive. But what I figure out, there's no leadership. In the Haredi community, there is no policy. It's not there's no vision about the future. When you open a newspaper, Haredi newspaper, you will never see any article that speaks about the future. To just response about things happening in Israel right now or yesterday. It's not about the policy, what we have to do, what is our vision, and what is our position in those times. So that's why I cannot expect that those people should save our community, or should create change, or should generate something different. I believe that the only way that things will really happen is only bottom up. People from the ground, they have, they have some pain in their heart. They understand, if we're going to stay sitting aside and waiting that Messiah is going to come, nothing will happen. We need to interfere the system. We need to be a part of it.
Okay, so it's a nice model, but there is growing frustration. And this is how we open the conversation about the hostility and the divide today within Israeli society. And there are Israelis who are saying, cut off the funding, stop giving money to the yeshivas, arrest the Haredim who don't serve in the army. Either they serve or they don't receive. What do you say to these people? And to some extent, Rabbi Bombach, and I'm the last person who wants to count where the funerals are taking place, but they're not taking place in the Haredi communities like they're taking place in other parts of Israel from the soldiers. So today, it's front, right, left, and center. It's everywhere where you look, you see that this is the issue.
Don't punish the community that they are not guilty. It's circumstances. I will explain. If you push the community, it's gonna create a regression. We have for some years ago, when Lapid tried to force the Haredi to go to the army, it creates regressions in all terms of numbers, also in the academic system. So people, I want to tell you something. The fact that I have so many schools, right, in many places, and I still exist, is because so many people in the Haredi community understand this is exactly what we need. And if you ask me, even the Haredi members of Knesset, they have power to punish me. but in some ways, it's like they understand. Continue. I would say no. I would be against you, but I understand what you are doing. It's like the story of Rav Shach. Rav Shach, one of the rabbis, he started for many years ago. You know the story. So I believe that to push the community, it's not the right thing. Then everybody become united inside the community. Listen, you know the numbers, that 10% are modern Haredim, another 30% are open-minded Haredim and pragmatic Haredim. So we're not going to influence those 50, 60% of the Haredi community, but yes, we can influence the 40%. They're very pragmatic. Some 10% are very open-minded. They see themselves as Israelis. So this is exactly the main mission, to focus to the right population, not to speak to the old population. If you give great results in education, if you speak with the right language, with respect, and with understanding, with empathy, you can get much more. Fighting, I don't believe it's. I think it's terrifying just thinking what could happen in Israel if people fight. We what we need now is only love and understanding. You know what? Once I can share with you one story, okay?
Yeah.
I before October 7, you know, it was a terrible fight in Israel. Everybody fights with. So I post in Facebook that I'm ready to facilitate any group that combines Haredim and secularists and just let's talk. So someone invited me in Tel Aviv, and next to me sat a guy, and he was really angry. And when I asked him what brings you to the group, he said, "I don't want to be here. I hate you." That's what he said. I hate you, but I have no choice because one of my friends forced me to come, but I don't want to be. And then when the second one, I asked him, "Can you please tell me if you can speak about your pain?" So he said, "There's so many issues, so many problems. Do you think you're going to resolve? It's a ventilation group. Do you think you're going to resolve these problems in just talking in 2 hours?" And he was terrible. It actually is one of the greatest professor surgeon in one of the greatest hospitals in Israel. He's a very special person. He has a lot of credits. And after 2 hours, he gave me a hug and he said, "Wow, I'm so blessed that I met you. I didn't know there are some Haredim like you." So, I mean, our mission is to reduce the tension.
But it will take time. But what you're saying is it's a journey. It will take time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But there is no choice. No choice. And you know what? I share with you that I ran a campaign since October 7. I asked for philanthropists to support it. Charedim leIsrael. Okay? Just very open name. I mean, it's a name that speaks, that says everything. Charedim leIsrael. And as I said, to encourage Charedim to go to the second stage in the army. And we get a lot of people, but not enough. I was frustrated. Because if you want 2,000, you need to get 10,000 because not everybody is accepted because for many reasons. So, but you can see it's something changed. People want to be a part, and I think that's the way. If you ask me, the only way to make a huge change in the coming years is only education. Because in our schools, I educate them for citizens how to become a citizens.
Right.
And this is what's important.
That spreads to other things as well.
That's spread. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Rabbi Bombach, Menachem Bombach, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And you know what? I mean, maybe it's politics is the answer, Rabbi. Maybe you need to go into politics and change the leadership in the Knesset. Just an idea, just throwing it out there. Thank you very much. It was great to have you on the podcast.
Nice meeting you. Bye-bye.
Shuki Friedman, Professor Shuki Friedman, Vice President of the Jewish People Policy Institute. It's great to have you on the podcast. And you're joining us just after we heard from Rabbi Menachem Bombach. We're talking about the Haredi draft or lack thereof. And before I have you respond to Rabbi Bombach, who really presented a bottom-up approach, right? Nothing top-down. Let's be nice. Let's let things happen on their own. Yes, Haredim should draft, but you can't force it down their throat. I mean, there has been the latest news that we're seeing, which is the government basically saying, we're not going to draft Haredim. We are going to continue to provide all the budgets that the Haredim want. And basically, we are going to be violating what the High Court of Justice had told us to do, which is to stop the budgets and to begin drafting Haredim.
Basically, we are dealing with this issue for about 75 years or 22 years since the Tal law tried to start and draft the Haredim to the army. And for 22 years, we have completely failed. We failed in almost all the dimensions of integrating ultra-Orthodox Haredim to the Israeli society. We failed with the army. We failed with the recruitment of Haredi male to the army almost completely. We failed with making them join to the workforce. We failed with education and higher education. We failed into almost every angle of the effort we have done in integrating the ultra-Orthodox to the Israeli society. And it is really a tragedy for them and a threat for the state of Israel.
So a tragedy for them is because less integrated, less education, less work opportunities, less money, more poverty, but a threat to Israel. Why?
First of all, for the ultra-Orthodox, 60% of the ultra-Orthodox kids are under a poverty line. 60%. They're hardly struggling to survive. But the majority of the ultra-Orthodox, furthermore, they live in complete ignorance. They're not capable of joining to the workforce because they don't educate itself. And therefore, they're living and they're blocked. The cult within the ghetto walls they built by themselves, but they culture. But most important is that if you continue this vector, and if you take in consideration the demographic vector with the ultra-Orthodox society, we are driving to a wall in 200 miles. Because in 40 years from now, the ultra-Orthodox will be third of the Israeli society, third of all Israelis. And if they don't work, don't pay tax, and doesn't go to the army, who will carry on this state, which is so
there won't be a state, exactly, right? But and just to further sharpen what you're saying, what people need to realize is if this is 30, 40 years away, if you don't make those changes now, then you won't have people to work in 30, 40 years because you're going to have ultra-Orthodox kids that are going to be born in the next 5 years. They're going to need to get an education. They're going to need to go work. And if they don't have those skills, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, we're in deep trouble. But Shuki, how do you change it, right? Because the Haredim talk about there's a process that's anyhow happening. It's society is changing. Let things take their time. There are more what they call the modern Haredim today, which, for example, Rabbi Bombach is a little more affiliated with, and he has his educational network, which has been very successful for women and for men. But it's obviously not enough. But how do you change it then?
First of all, the question is whether there's a change. And there is some moderate change within the ultra-Orthodox society. The so-called modern ultra-Orthodox Haredim are changing, but they're marginal. They're almost less than 10% of all the ultra-Orthodox, and the majority are very conservative, but furthermore and more interesting, basically, the so moderate change doesn't cut the very fast pace of demographic growth, which is mainly in the conservative parts of the ultra-Orthodox. And therefore, in a few years, the community, the Haredi community will see next to us in Jerusalem or places in Israel would not be the same. It would be more conservative if the trend continues. So what can we do? We can do a lot. The ultra-Orthodox built this community mainly on state budgets and state enablers that let them be free of any duties, be free of the duty of recruitment to the army, be free of joining to the workforce and then pay tax, be free of education is required from every young individual in Israel, and this must change if we continue to let them use our budgets, Israeli state budgets, to hide the ghetto walls. They will keep themselves in the ghetto, and we would not survive.
By the way, I mean, I think something that a lot of people don't, who don't live this issue like you have, and you've been, advocating and writing about this for at least 20, 25 years now. But I think what people don't understand always is that this is Israel doing it to itself. In other words, like, you talk about the enablers. Every government, essentially, by just handing them a blank check and saying, do with it what you want, we will fund you. We will actively fund unemployment. We will actively fund the dodging of the draft. We will actively fund people not to be productive in Israeli society. It's like, what country shoots itself in the head or in the leg like that? But so basically what you're saying, though, is stop the budgets and use force or imprisonment to recruit them. That won't happen with this coalition.
It's all about politics, you're right. For 30 years, maybe more than that, maybe 50 years from 77, from Begin's government, almost all Israeli governments bought political stability by budgets and resources and exemption to the ultra-Orthodox. That should be changed. You're right, this government would never do it, would never change anything. It would never draft another Haredi to the army. It would not take the resources or country resources and the budgets to the yeshivot. To do nothing. But the only thing that will save the state of Israel would be a coming government, hopefully in the near elections, that will assemble what I call the Zionist bloc, which means if the government will have a real will and willingness to unite against, not necessarily against, but not supporting continuing this policy, this is the only way to change, to make the historic and dramatic change we need. And otherwise, if we not manage the Zionist bloc to unite and to force the Haredim to go to the army, not necessarily by jailing them, but you can force them by economic sanctions, you can cut their budgets, and every resource of the state gives them to continue and basically enable them to strengthen the community. If we do it successfully in the next 10 years, we will save ourselves from definitely a very black future.
So considering that there is a lot of politics that are played here, and you mentioned Menachem Begin, because everyone tends to go back to Ben Gurion, who gave that initial exemption, but it was Begin who took the number and basically gave a carte blanche and said to the Haredim, you can do as many as you want. But let's assume for a moment that this Zionist bloc that you talk about is possible, and it would be a government without the ultra-Orthodox. But according to your just analysis for a moment, you have this kind of sword hanging over the coalition because the Haredim are being told you have to now cut off the budgets. The government saying we're not yet going to do that. Do you think this will bring down the government?
There is a chance that it would happen, because if Gantz and Gallant will sustain their positions that would not submit or join draft laws that not recruiting seriously the ultra-Orthodox to the army, and on the other side, the ultra-Orthodox would not compromise on anything, and they're already declared. You can see it in the media that their spiritual leadership, the rabbis, already declared that they would not compromise, not even on those Haredim that not learning Torah, but hanging around in the streets, but they would not go never to the army. Therefore, basically, there is a potential, in my perspective, positive potential for the government to collapse based on this tension. And there are so many other tensions within the government that it also be an additional tension or weight on the shoulder of the government that make it go to the election in the near future.
Shuki, before I let you go, just one last question, because this is driving me crazy, and it's kind of connected, but I want to get your thoughts. So Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who's the Sephardic chief rabbi, said a few weeks ago, if you want to draft us, then we're just going to leave the country, right? And very controversial statement, obviously, to make, considering that he is the chief rabbi meant to represent all of Israelis, including those who actually served, just to say, if you're going to recruit some, we're going to leave the country. And while your salary is being paid by taxpayers is just ridiculous and crazy, and speaks back to what you told of how we are funding these people to actually do these things that are against the state. But then the country, if that's not enough, then we go ahead and we're awarding this guy the Israel Prize. I mean, like, how crazy can things really be here? Personally, I just have to say, it drives me nuts when I hear it. Like, you want to go. We're paying you taxpayer money, fine. But now we're actually giving you the greatest, highest award and honor in this country. I mean, what's wrong with this place?
I know. Many things wrong in this place, definitely in the recent few months. But for this, basically, you have to understand that the ultra-Orthodox doesn't really care about the state of Israel. They care much more about their community and their core interest and the highest interest, if you recognize their interest in where they're willing to put their political effort, is sustaining the community, keeping it behind the walls, keeping their political power, and in some ways, somewhere down the road, maybe interest of the state of Israel and its prosperity as a state. And therefore, and I think the chief rabbi expressed it, you're completely right. I mean, it's devastating that the chief rabbi, the highest ranking official that representing the Jewish religion, is expressing such a negative sentiment toward the state. But this is the situation, and he's really expressing the ultra-Orthodox Haredi sentiment. In their perspective, they rather prefer to remain in yeshivot, to remain behind their walls, and the rest of the state can go
who knows?
In their way.
This is just, we got so much going on in this country at the moment, and this is just another one of those issues that kind of now seems less important, but really is so fundamental for the continued sustainability and survival of the state of Israel. So I want to thank you, Shuki. I want to thank Rabbi Bombach for joining us. And I also want to thank you, all our listeners and viewers, for joining us this week. We're going to be taking off. There will not be an episode this coming Monday, because instead we're going to be sitting around the Seder table, celebrating the holiday of Passover, of Pesach. I want to wish all of you a Chag Sameach, a happy holiday from all of us here at the JPPI, at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Thank you very much for being with us. We wish you a happy holiday, a safe and secure holiday. We'll be back on Thursday of Chol HaMoed, so we will have an episode next Thursday. So stay tuned, and in the meantime, enjoy the holiday break. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.